A young boy vanished without a trace while chasing his runaway puppy through the neighborhood, leaving his family desperate for answers. The entire community joined the search, combing through every street and alley, but found nothing. But 5 days later, a search dog refuses to leave a storm drain on the edge of town, barking and pawing frantically at the ground. When rescuers finally look inside, what they discover makes everyone's heart stop. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where in the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you how it all happened. Rebecca Williams shaped the pancake batter into a perfect dinosaur silhouette, smiling as she glanced through the kitchen window. In the backyard, 8-year-old Ethan was teaching Scout, his 3-week-old golden retriever puppy, to sit on command. The October sun cast long shadows across their yard, where fallen maple leaves created a russet carpet beneath Ethan's sneakers. "Success!" Ethan shouted, his sun-bleached hair catching the light, as Scout managed a wobbly approximation of sitting. His infectious laugh carried through the open window, warming Rebecca's heart more than the autumn sunshine ever could. "Lunch in 30 minutes, she called out, receiving a distracted wave from her son, who was already moving on to the next trick in his impromptu training session. Upstairs, Mark's occasional muttering floated down as he battled with the leaky faucet in the bathroom. A typical Saturday morning in Mapleton, Colorado, peaceful, ordinary, perfect in its simplicity. Rebecca folded chocolate chips into a second batch of pancake batter, Ethan's favorite. She hummed softly, enjoying the comfortable rhythm of weekend mornings in their tree-lined suburban neighborhood, where children still played freely until streetlights signaled time to come home. At 11:42, Rebecca noticed the silence first. The distinctive melody of Ethan's laughter had stopped. She paused, spatula in hand, listening for the familiar sounds of boy and puppy at play. Nothing. Setting down her mixing bowl, she moved to the window again. The yard lay empty except for Ethan's abandoned jacket crumpled near the swing set. Her heart rate quickened slightly, though she tried to remain calm. "Ethan?" she called, stepping onto the back porch. The wind rustled through the remaining leaves on the maple trees. No response. Rebecca's eyes scanned the perimeter of their fenced yard, stopping at a loose board on the far side, the one Mark had promised to fix this weekend. It was pushed aside just enough for a small dog and a determined boy to squeeze through. "Ethan!" she called again, louder this time, moving quickly across the yard. Kneeling by the fence, she could see small footprints in the soft earth on the other side. Within minutes, Rebecca had checked with the neighbors on either side. No one had seen Ethan. She returned to the house, anxiety building in her chest. "Mark!" she called upstairs. "Ethan's gone through the fence. I can't find him." Mark appeared at the top of the stairs, wrench still in hand. "What do you mean, gone?" 20 minutes later, Mark was driving slowly through the neighborhood streets while Rebecca canvassed the nearby houses on foot. Mrs. Peterson, a retired teacher from 2 doors down, offered the first clue. "I saw him running after that puppy of his," she said, worry creasing her forehead. "That was around 11:30, I think. He was headed toward Willowbrook Park, calling the dog's name." By 2 o'clock, with no sign of Ethan and growing panic, the Williams called the Mapleton Police Department. Officer Ramirez arrived within 15 minutes, his expression serious but reassuring as he took detailed notes. "Most missing children return home within a few hours," he explained, already radioing for additional officers to begin searching the park. "But we take every report seriously, especially with a child this young." As dusk approached, Willowbrook Park filled with flashlight beams. Neighbors joined police in searching every playground structure, wooded area, and walking path. The K-9 unit arrived, using one of Ethan's T-shirts to give the search dogs his scent. Detective Sarah Morales established a command center at the park entrance, coordinating search teams and interviewing anyone who might have been in the area that morning. Rebecca stood nearby, clutching Ethan's school photo, her fingers trembling. The first troubling development came as darkness fell. A search volunteer found Scout alone near the park's north entrance, muddy and disoriented but unharmed. Of Ethan there was no sign. Kids don't just vanish, Mark insisted, his voice cracking as he clutched Scout's leash. Someone must have seen something. Security camera footage from the gas station across from the park showed Ethan chasing Scout into the park at 11:47 that morning, but none of the exit cameras captured him leaving. An initial search revealed only one of Ethan's sneakers near the old playground, its laces still tied. As midnight approached, Rebecca sat rigidly in their living room surrounded by concerned neighbors, her eyes fixed on the door as if willing it to open and reveal her son. Upstairs, Ethan's dinosaur nightlight cast shadows across his empty bed, the sheets still rumpled from that morning, a frozen moment from a world that no longer existed. While Mark finally collapsed on the sofa, exhausted after hours of searching, the phone rang. It was Detective Morales informing them that although they still hadn't found Ethan, a man walking his dog in the morning had reported hearing what sounded like a child crying, coming from somewhere near the park's old storm drains. Detective Morales and two officers examined the old drain area at dawn, finding only wet leaves and no concrete evidence of the reported crying. The morning light cast long shadows over the search area, making the task even more challenging as they meticulously documented every inch of ground surrounding the drainage entrance. By the third day, the police conference room had transformed into a war room. A whiteboard covered with timelines, photos, and maps dominated one wall, while only 24 volunteers signed in compared to the hundreds who had shown up on that first desperate day. Rebecca watched from the doorway, her heart sinking at the dwindling numbers. Hope was fading, just like the media presence outside their home. Through the living room window, Rebecca observed news vans beginning to depart. A local TV reporter's voice drifted from the set. As hope diminishes for finding 8-year-old Ethan Williams. She quickly switched it off, unable to bear the finality in the reporter's tone. Later that evening, tension filled the Williams kitchen as Mark paced frantically. "We need to offer a reward, appear on national news programs," he insisted, slamming his hand on the counter. Rebecca shook her head, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "The police said that might drive whoever took him further underground," she replied softly. "We need to trust them, Mark." Night after night, Rebecca found herself lying in Ethan's bed, clutching his favorite teddy bear to her chest. The dinosaur nightlight cast eerie shadows across the room, while downstairs, Mark obsessively reviewed neighborhood maps and constructed timelines on the dining room wall, pinning string between locations, searching for patterns no one else could see. Detective Morales sat at the Williams kitchen table on the fourth morning, her tone subtly shifting as she flipped through her notebook. "Mark, can you tell me again where you were Thursday evening, just to confirm our timeline?" The implication wasn't lost on Rebecca, who quietly left the room, tears threatening to spill. At the supermarket that afternoon, Rebecca noticed conversations stopping when she entered an aisle. She caught glances of pity mixed with something more disturbing, suspicion. She abandoned her half-filled cart and fled to her car, hands shaking too badly to insert the key into the ignition. On the fourth day, a breakthrough finally came when a K-9 officer and his search dog conducted a routine sweep along the park's perimeter. The dog suddenly alerted near a pile of fallen leaves, pulling its handler forcefully toward the spot. Carefully placed in an evidence bag was a child's sock with dinosaur prints, matching exactly what Ethan had been wearing the day he disappeared. Rebecca identified it with trembling fingers, hope rekindling painfully in her chest. Terry Hoffman, the city's aging infrastructure manager, spread faded blueprints of the drainage system across a police cruiser's hood, pointing to tunnels that aren't even on modern maps. His weathered finger traced complex pathways built in the 1950s, forgotten by all but the oldest city workers. Search teams with specialized equipment, powerful flashlights, waterproof radios, oxygen meters, prepared to explore the accessible entrances of the drainage system. Rebecca watched them descend one by one into the darkness, praying they would emerge with her son. She accidentally overheard two female volunteers whispering about Mark's convenient business trip canceled the week before Ethan's disappearance. The women fell silent when they noticed Rebecca, offering tight smiles before quickly walking away. That night, Mark sat alone in the backyard, holding Scout's favorite toy, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs as guilt over the delayed fence repair consumed him. In her office late that night, Detective Morales reviewed unsolved case files, pausing when she noticed 3 other child disappearances within an 80-mile radius over the past decade, all near parks with similar drainage infrastructure. She began connecting dots that formed a disturbing pattern. On the 5th morning, Rex, a German shepherd from the K9 unit, suddenly broke protocol during a routine sweep, racing toward a storm drain entrance covered by fallen branches and years of debris. He barked frantically, refusing to leave despite his handler's commands. As handlers tried to control Rex, everyone froze at hearing a faint but unmistakable sound coming from within the darkness of the obstructed drain, not an echo of the search team's calls, but the distinct sound of puppy barks, followed by what seemed to be a child's voice weakly calling for help. The sound of puppy barks galvanized the search team into immediate action. Emergency workers rushed forward with chainsaws and shovels, attacking the debris that had hidden the drain entrance for so long. The distinctive sound of machinery cutting through branches and undergrowth filled the park as bystanders watched with renewed hope. "Stand back," Fire Chief Rodriguez commanded, establishing a perimeter around the newly discovered opening. "This whole section could come down with the wrong movement. We need structural engineers before we send anyone else in." Within 30 minutes, a crowd had gathered behind the yellow caution tape, whispering and pointing as workers carefully removed layers of accumulated debris. The entrance revealed itself, a narrow concrete tube, its opening partially collapsed about 10 feet in. Detective Morales knelt near the cleared entrance, listening intently. What had initially sounded like an echo of their own calls now came again, unmistakably human, though weak and distant. "Ethan?" she called, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her body. "Ethan Williams, can you hear us?" A faint response echoed back through the darkness, sending chills through everyone present. Word spread rapidly through the gathered crowd, cascading through radios and cell phones until it reached the Williams home, where Rebecca collapsed into Mark's arms. "He's alive," she sobbed, clinging to her husband. They heard him. The next hours unfolded with excruciating slowness. Structural engineers arrived with equipment to assess the stability of the tunnel, conferring in serious tones about potential secondary collapse and limited intervention options. A narrow rescue shaft would need to be carefully excavated to reach the pocket where Ethan appeared to be trapped. Media descended once again on Mapleton, broadcasting live as rescue workers methodically removed debris. Neighbors who had begun to eye the Williams family with suspicion now stood vigil alongside them, offering silent support as the rescue effort continued through the night under powerful floodlights. By dawn on the 6th day, paramedic Jennifer Chen had managed to pass a communication device through the narrow opening they'd created. Her face broke into a relieved smile as she reported back to the anxious parents. "He's weak but alert," she explained. "And Scout is with him. The dog apparently led him into the drain when he chased after something. Then there was some kind of collapse that trapped them in a small air pocket. The dog actually kept him warm through the nights." Rebecca pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Scout saved him," she whispered to Mark. "All this time, Scout was keeping him alive." While structural engineers worked to ensure the rescue wouldn't trigger further collapse, Detective Morales pulled the Williams aside with troubling news. Her expression was grave as she showed them photographs of the drain entrance. "This wasn't just an accident," she explained quietly. "Someone deliberately concealed this entrance with branches and debris that wouldn't have naturally accumulated there. The pattern suggests intentional camouflage, possibly after Ethan went inside." Mark's face hardened. "Are you saying someone tried to make sure he wouldn't be found?" A search of county maintenance records revealed no authorized work on the drainage system in over 2 years. More troublingly, Detective Morales shared her discovery about 3 other child disappearances within a 50-mile radius over the past decade, all occurring near parks with similar drainage infrastructure. None of those children had ever been found. As rescue workers finally created an opening large enough for a small team member to squeeze through, the Williams family stood hand in hand, their earlier conflicts forgotten in the face of both hope and new fear. The crowd fell silent as a slender firefighter disappeared into the narrow passage, headlamp illuminating his path into the darkness. While the family waited with bated breath, Detective Morales stepped away to take a call from the forensics team. When she returned, her expression was even more serious than before. The first analysis of the branches used to cover the entrance shows something concerning, she told her partner quietly. They found partial boot prints nearby that match those seen in one of our previous missing children cases, and they also match the boots worn by one of the first volunteers in the search, a local teenager named Lucas Porter. Detective Morales's revelation about Lucas Porter sent a ripple of shock through the search team. While they processed this disturbing connection, the slender firefighter emerged from the narrow passage, his uniform covered in mud and his face illuminated with triumph. In his arms, he cradled Ethan Williams, with Scout nestled protectively against the boy's chest. A deafening cheer erupted from the crowd as Ethan emerged into daylight for the first time in nearly 6 days. Despite the oxygen mask covering his face, his eyes were alert, scanning the faces until he found his parents. He weakly extended a trembling hand toward them as paramedics rushed forward with a stretcher. "He's asking about the dog," firefighter Miguel Sanchez reported as medical staff transferred Ethan onto the stretcher. His first words were to make sure Scout was okay. Rebecca and Mark ran alongside the stretcher as paramedics carried Ethan toward the waiting ambulance. Scout refused to leave the boy's side, whining anxiously when a veterinary technician attempted to examine him separately. The golden retriever puppy, now filthy and matted, maintained his protective vigil even as they loaded Ethan into the ambulance. At Mapleton Memorial Hospital, doctors and nurses worked efficiently to assess Ethan's condition. Dr. Patel, the pediatric specialist, emerged from the examination room with an expression of amazement. Beyond moderate dehydration and mild hypothermia, he has only superficial scratches, he explained to the anxious parents waiting in the corridor. Physically, he's remarkably well for someone who spent 6 days underground. The dog's body heat likely prevented severe hypothermia during the cold nights. Later that afternoon, Ethan lay in a hospital bed with an IV delivering fluids to his arm. His voice was weak but coherent as he told Detective Morales how he had followed Scout into the drain when the puppy saw something and just took off. He made no mention of seeing anyone else during the ordeal. While the Williams family began their reunion at the hospital, Detective Morales led a thorough forensic examination of the drainage entrance. Her team photographed and collected samples from the branches and debris used to conceal it. A technician discovered a distinctive blue fiber caught on one of the branches, a fiber that didn't match anything Ethan had been wearing. Across town, officers arrived at the modest Porter residence, finding 17-year-old Lucas in his bedroom. Horror movie posters covered the walls, and a pair of muddy boots lay partially hidden under his bed. Initially defensive during questioning, Lucas's demeanor changed when presented with the evidence, boot prints and fibers from his jacket found on the branches used to cover the entrance. "I was biking through and heard a dog barking inside," he confessed quietly in the interrogation room, his eyes fixed on the table. "It was annoying, so I just covered it more. I didn't know there was a kid in there." Detective Morales reviewed Lucas's history, school reports documenting concerning behavior, 2 previous animal cruelty complaints that had never been prosecuted, and his geographical connection to at least 1 previous disappearance. While not the calculating predator initially feared, his callous disregard had nearly cost Ethan his life. 2 weeks after his rescue, Ethan returned home to a neighborhood transformed. A welcome home banner hung across the front of the house as neighbors applauded his walk from the car to the front door, Scout firmly at his side. The city council voted unanimously to approve emergency funding to map and secure all drainage entrances throughout Mapleton. That evening, Rebecca and Mark sat in their quiet living room after Ethan had finally fallen asleep, processing the complicated truth of what had happened. Not a calculating predator, but a perfect storm of accidents, and one troubled teenager's impulsive action had nearly taken their son from them forever. As Rebecca filed away the hospital paperwork in her desk drawer, she discovered a drawing Ethan had made during his session with the child psychologist. A shadowy figure watching from the tunnel entrance before it was covered, a figure that looked nothing like Lucas Porter, raising the disturbing question. Had Ethan actually seen someone else that day, someone who remained unidentified? Rebecca stared at Ethan's drawing, her hand trembling. The shadowy figure watching from the tunnel entrance looked nothing like Lucas Porter's lanky teenage frame. It was broader, older, and somehow more methodical in its stance. She quickly tucked the drawing away when Mark entered the room, unsure whether to share this disturbing new detail. 1 month after his rescue, Ethan was slowly readjusting to normal life. His physical recovery had been remarkably swift, but the psychological impact revealed itself in small ways. His newfound fear of darkness, his reluctance to let Scout out of his sight, and the nightmares that frequently woke the household. During his 3rd session with Dr. Lydia Bennett, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, Ethan casually mentioned something that made the doctor pause mid-note. "Sometimes the whispering person from the other side would tell me stories," he said, coloring calmly with crayons. "When Scout was sleeping and I got scared, Dr. Bennett maintained a neutral expression while making careful notes." "Could you see this person, Ethan?" she asked gently. Ethan shook his head without looking up from his drawing. "No, it was too dark and there were rocks in the way. But he knew my name." In the waiting room, Rebecca and Mark sat in uncomfortable silence. The strain of the past month had created a chasm between them that neither knew how to bridge. Rebecca flipped absently through a magazine while Mark checked his phone repeatedly, a new habit born from constant vigilance. After the session, Dr. Bennett discussed her concerns with the Williams. Children often develop imaginary companions or perceive presences during traumatic situations. "It's a coping mechanism," she explained. However, the specificity of Ethan's descriptions is unusual. He's consistently mentioned this whispering person across multiple sessions. Across town, a municipal team mapping the drainage system made a disturbing discovery. Their powerful flashlights revealed a wider space containing a thin, dusty mattress, empty food wrappers, and a pile of blankets. What they initially assumed was a homeless encampment took on a more sinister aspect when they found a wall where laminated newspaper clippings, all about missing children from the region, were meticulously affixed. Detective Morales crouched in the tunnel, her gloved hands carefully examining the space. "This wasn't set up recently," she noted to her partner. "Look at the dust patterns. Someone's been using this place periodically for years." In the forensics lab, a technician examined partial fingerprints recovered from food wrappers, comparing them against the police database. The system churned through thousands of possibilities while Morales waited, her concern growing by the minute. That night, Rebecca heard Ethan screaming from another nightmare. She rushed to his room to find him sitting upright, his eyes wide with terror. "He's calling for me again," he whispered as she gathered him into her arms. The next morning, Mark finally repaired the loose fence board, using new tools to install additional reinforcements. Each hammer strike seemed to carry the weight of his guilt and determination to protect his family. During a joint therapy session later that week, Rebecca and Mark sat uncomfortably distant on the couch as their therapist guided them through a discussion about how trauma had affected their relationship. "I was so quick to blame you," Rebecca admitted tearfully. "I needed someone to be at fault, and you were there." "I blamed myself enough for both of us," Mark responded quietly. The following day, Rebecca met Detective Morales for coffee, flipping through a photo album of evidence found in the tunnel. She paused at a torn page from a children's book, the same story Ethan said the voice had told him during his time underground. While Ethan and Scout played in the backyard under Rebecca's watchful eye, an unfamiliar car drove slowly past their house. The driver briefly looked toward them before accelerating away, leaving Rebecca with a chill she couldn't explain. In her office, Detective Morales stood before a newly assembled evidence board showing photos of 5 missing children over a 12-year period, all connected by red markers to locations with ancient drainage systems. While Rebecca was putting away the hospital paperwork in her desk drawer that evening, she received an urgent call from Detective Morales. The partial fingerprints recovered from the underground camp matched a former employee of the Mapleton Public Works Department named Victor Mercer, who not only had access to complete drainage system blueprints, but had also worked as a substitute janitor at Ethan's elementary school 6 months before his disappearance. Detective Morales stood before the evidence board, her fingers tracing the connections between the photographs. Victor Mercer's image now dominated the center. A 58-year-old man with unremarkable features, except for his unnervingly deep-set eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This man knows the drainage system better than anyone," Police Chief Hayes told the assembled task force at Mapleton Police Department. "He has hideouts that aren't even on the maps. We need to think like him to get ahead of him." Lieutenant Fisher from the Records Department handed Morales a thick folder. Complete employment history for Mercer. He always applied for jobs with access to children, parks, schools, community clubs. Never stayed longer than 6 months at any position. The Williams family received the news about Mercer with horror. Rebecca sat rigidly in the principal's office at Ethan's school while the administrator reviewed employment records. "Yes, Mr. Mercer worked as a substitute janitor for 3 weeks in April," the principal confirmed, her face pale. "He specifically requested the shift that covered lunch and recess periods." With search warrants in hand, teams of officers raided Mercer's nearly empty apartment across town. What they found chilled even the most seasoned detectives: walls covered with detailed maps of the drainage system, meticulously annotated with notes and markings in cramped handwriting. A locked closet in Mercer's apartment yielded the most disturbing discovery. When forced open, it revealed a collection of souvenirs, a small shoe from each of the missing children, alongside surveillance photos of Ethan taken from the school playground. That night, Mark confronted Rebecca in their bedroom, his voice breaking with emotion. "He was watching our son for months, and we noticed nothing. What kind of parents are we?" During his next session with Dr. Bennett, Ethan used dolls to demonstrate where he had been trapped and described how the man's voice had promised to return for him, saying he had a special place for special children like you. Specialized search teams in full protective gear entered the drainage system through various access points, communicating by radio as they navigated the underground labyrinth. Their findings were reported back to the command center, where a digital 3D map was continuously updated, revealing a system far more extensive than official maps showed, with dozens of undocumented chambers and tunnels. An undercover officer was stationed in front of the Williams home, carefully observing every passing car while other agents monitored the perimeter. The family had been advised against leaving town, though they remained under constant protection. The FBI arrived in Mapleton the following day. Special Agent Clark introduced his team, specializing in child predators, bringing advanced tracking technology and psychological profiling expertise. "Mercer fits a specific category of predator," Clark explained to Detective Morales. "He's not impulsive. He's methodical, patient, and believes he's rescuing these children." While reviewing recent security footage from the local bus station, Detective Morales and Agent Clark caught a glimpse of a man matching Mercer's description boarding a bus to Denver 3 days earlier. "He's on the move," Clark noted grimly, "but I don't think he's running away. He's repositioning." That night, Ethan woke with a start, running to his parents' room in terror. "He's here," he cried, trembling violently. "I smelled him, the same smell from the tunnel." Officers frantically checked the perimeter following Ethan's alarm, finding nothing, until one of them noticed a manhole cover slightly displaced on the street, a sign that someone might have used the sewer system to approach the house undetected. In the middle of the night, while officers searched the neighborhood for signs of Mercer, Scout suddenly began barking furiously in the Williams basement, the same distinctive behavior he had exhibited when Ethan was trapped, and everyone froze at hearing a muffled noise coming from behind the basement wall, where old blueprints showed a forgotten connection to the main drainage system, now sealed by a thin layer of concrete that was beginning to crack. The sound of Scout's frantic barking galvanized everyone into action. Officers drew their weapons as they approached the basement wall, where hairline cracks were spreading across the concrete surface, small pieces already beginning to crumble onto the floor. "Get the family out now," Detective Morales ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. Two officers immediately escorted the Williams family upstairs, while tactical team members took position around the basement. Within minutes, the house was surrounded by police vehicles, their lights silently flashing in the pre-dawn darkness. Rebecca clutched Ethan's half-asleep form as they hurried to an unmarked SUV, Mark close behind with Scout still barking and straining against his leash. "He found us through the basement," Mark whispered, his face ashen. "All this time there was a way in right under our feet." Structural engineers arrived within the hour, their specialized equipment revealing the true nature of the basement wall. "This section was added in the 70s, explained the lead engineer, pointing to ultrasound images. "The original blueprint shows a direct connection to the main drainage system that was supposedly sealed off during renovations." At the safe house 20 miles away, Ethan finally drifted back to sleep, Scout vigilant at the foot of his bed. Rebecca and Mark sat in stunned silence in the adjacent room, the gravity of their narrow escape settling over them. "How did he find us?" Rebecca asked the FBI agent stationed outside Ethan's door. The safe house location was classified. By mid-morning, Detective Morales and Agent Clark were examining original blueprints of the Williams home dated 1954, showing a direct connection to the drainage system that had been removed from updated plans. "Mercer worked for Public Works for almost 2 decades, Agent Clark explained to the investigation team. "He'd have access to every original blueprint, every forgotten connection. The city's underbelly is his playground." Across town, forensics teams were carefully documenting the crumbling basement wall, collecting concrete samples and what appeared to be tool marks where someone had been systematically weakening the barrier from the other side. Later that afternoon, the FBI's behavioral analyst presented her assessment to the assembled investigators. "Mercer himself was a lost child," she explained, displaying childhood records. "His obsession isn't just with the tunnels, but with recreating his own experience, only this time he controls who gets saved." An analyst handed Agent Clark a file containing records from a child psychiatrist who treated Mercer after his own incident at age 9. "He described his time in the tunnels as magical and the only place where I felt safe," Clark read aloud, his expression grim. Meanwhile, specialized teams advanced cautiously through the tunnels, documenting evidence they encountered, an area with shelves of supplies, another with children's mattresses arranged in a circle, and a wall covered with photos of children taken secretly in parks and schools. One investigator found a locked journal hidden in a tunnel crevice. Its pages revealed Mercer's disturbed thoughts, including references to creating an underground sanctuary for special children away from parents who don't deserve them. The most devastating discovery came that evening when the search team located a chamber containing personal belongings of missing children, small drawings, notes, even voice recordings on old cassette tapes, proving they had been alive in the tunnels for weeks or months after their disappearances. In the safe house bathroom, Rebecca finally allowed herself to cry uncontrollably, confronting fully how close they had come to a very different outcome for her son. On the hotel balcony late that night, Mark spoke quietly on the phone with his parents, finally able to articulate his feelings. "We almost lost him, and we almost lost ourselves in the process." Ethan woke suddenly from a nightmare, describing to his parents in vivid detail how Mercer used to talk to him through the collapsed walls, promising to return to complete the rescue and take him to a special place with other special children. As Detective Morales and Agent Clark studied an updated map of the tunnel system, now marked with all of Mercer's discovered hideouts and camps, an emergency call came into the command center, a 10-year-old girl had disappeared from a playground in Riverside, a town 40 miles away, with witnesses reporting a man matching Mercer's description watching the children moments before. While the task force mobilized to respond to the new disappearance, the hotel phone rang in the Williams suite. Rebecca answered, her voice tight with tension. "Mrs. Williams, this is the front desk. There's a package for you from an officer who dropped it off earlier." Mark exchanged a worried glance with Rebecca as she thanked the receptionist. "Did anyone order anything?" he asked, already reaching for his phone to alert their protection detail. Within minutes, an FBI agent had retrieved the small manila envelope and brought it to their room, examining it carefully before handing it over. It passed the initial security scan, but open it carefully. Rebecca's hands trembled as she tore the seal. Inside was a single item, Ethan's school identification badge, which had been clipped to his backpack the day he disappeared. Attached was a handwritten note that made her blood freeze. "He's still mine. You're just borrowing him." "It's Mercer," Mark whispered, taking the note with 2 fingers and placing it back in the envelope. "He's been watching us this whole time." Agent Clark burst into action upon seeing the evidence, immediately ordering a complete lockdown of the hotel and surrounding area. The report about the missing girl in Riverside was false, he confirmed, his face grim. Another diversion, just like before. Within an hour, the Williams family was being transferred again, this time to an undisclosed location via helicopter. Rebecca held Ethan close, watching the city lights recede below them. Scout whined softly from his carrier, sensing the renewed tension. At the FBI field office, forensic specialists examined the note and badge. "The paper has traces of the same mineral deposits found in the tunnel system," a technician reported, "and there are partial prints matching samples from the underground camps." Detective Morales and Agent Clark huddled with their tactical team, reviewing security footage from the hotel and surrounding streets. "He's playing with us," Clark observed. "Testing our response times, seeing how we redirect resources. Every false move teaches him our playbook." In the new safe house, a remote cabin owned by the Bureau, Rebecca watched Ethan sleeping. "He's going to keep hunting us, isn't he?" she whispered to Mark, "no matter where we run." The following morning, Agent Clark presented his plan to the assembled team. Mercer sees the tunnels as a sanctuary. He genuinely believes he's saving these children. If we can make him think Ethan wants to return, it might draw him out into the open. The Williams' objection was immediate and vehement. "You want to use my son as bait?" Rebecca shouted, rising from her chair. Mark placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Not the real Ethan," he said slowly, the idea taking shape in his mind. Just the idea of him. A carefully staged press conference was arranged where a designated psychologist discussed the concerning symptoms Ethan was supposedly exhibiting, including a compulsive fixation with the tunnels and expressed desire to return to what he calls the quiet place. Technical teams installed sophisticated surveillance equipment around a park similar to Willowbrook, positioning hidden cameras and motion sensors at every possible entrance to the drainage system. A child agent approximately Ethan's age and appearance was briefed on his role, while tactical agents demonstrated emergency extraction routes in case Mercer appeared. Mark watched local news broadcasts in the safe house, seeing the fabricated story about Ethan being disseminated. "What if other children see this?" he asked bitterly. "What if it gives ideas to other predators?" In a surveillance van, Agent Clark monitored feeds from multiple cameras as the child agent deliberately played near a known drainage entrance. Disguised agents were strategically positioned throughout the park. The janitor approaching the playground caught Detective Morales' attention immediately. Something about his methodical movements seemed off as he slowly collected trash near the swings. Tension mounted in the surveillance van as the janitor began moving in a circular pattern that gradually brought him closer to the child agent. "Stand ready," Clark ordered, "but don't move until we have positive visual confirmation." The janitor suddenly looked directly at one of the hidden cameras, a slow smile spreading across his face as he gave a slight wave. Not Mercer, but someone he had sent as another test, and the moment the operation realized they'd been fooled again, a security breach alert sounded at the safe house. The power failed, and Rebecca screamed when she realized Ethan was no longer in the bedroom where he had been sleeping just minutes before. Rebecca's scream echoed through the safe house as she discovered Ethan's empty bed, the sheets still warm from his body. The backup generator kicked in seconds later, casting emergency lighting across the cabin as agents rushed toward the sound of her voice. "He was just here," she sobbed, clutching Ethan's abandoned pillow. "I checked on him 5 minutes ago." The horror of what had happened sank in immediately. The elaborate decoy operation at the park had been Mercer's plan all along, designed to draw resources and attention away from the safe house. The realization that they had been outmaneuvered again sent waves of despair through the assembled team. Chief Hayes barked orders into his radio as agents swept the perimeter. Full lockdown of the area, no one in or out within a 5-mile radius. Inside Ethan's room, Agent Clark knelt to examine a small hole professionally cut through the window glass. He extracted a tiny device with tweezers, holding it up to the light. Sedative gas dispenser, designed to affect only the lowest level of the room, where a child would be sleeping. Forensic technicians discovered the entry point 30 minutes later, a section of plumbing beneath the cabin that had been disguised as a standard repair but actually provided access to the space beneath the floorboards. Detective Morales pulled up the property records on her tablet, her face grim as she showed them to Clark. Victor Mercer worked on the renovation of this property 6 years ago, when it was being adapted to occasionally serve as a safe house for witnesses, she explained, scrolling through employment records that confirmed his involvement in the cabin's plumbing system overhaul. Rebecca collapsed into Mark's arms, her body racked with sobs. "We're back to square one. How could he have found us? How could he have taken him again?" During the emergency task force meeting that followed, Chief Hayes pounded his fist on the table. "He knows us better than we know him. He's probably worked on half the buildings in this city. We need to think differently." Hours later, as investigators continued processing the scene, Mark sat on Ethan's empty bed, staring blankly at Scout's leash hanging on the bedpost. Suddenly his eyes widened. Scout is gone too. Rebecca, have you seen Scout since he took Ethan?" This new realization sparked immediate action. A veterinary technician quickly connected to the animal microchip database, locating Scout's faint signal in an abandoned industrial area on the eastern edge of the city. Satellite images revealed an old water treatment facility that had been decommissioned 15 years earlier, connected to the main drainage system by multiple access points. Tactical teams silently surrounded the complex, while thermal cameras detected movement underground. Scout, found wandering near a partially hidden entrance, barked and pulled toward the building when he recognized the officers. Inside the facility, dark industrial corridors led to a series of modified rooms. One contained supplies sufficient for months of isolation, another featured children's beds, arranged like a dormitory, and a third had been set up as an improvised classroom complete with books and educational materials. Detective Morales and a small team discovered a room filled with security monitors showing feeds from cameras positioned throughout the city, including one with a view of the police station and another showing the original Williams home. The extent of Mercer's surveillance network was staggering. In the makeshift command van, Rebecca and Mark watched live feeds from the tactical teams methodically clearing rooms, their terror growing with each empty space encountered. One discovery sent chills through the entire team. A blackboard in one of the underground rooms listed the names of several missing children in order, including those from old cases, with Ethan written at the end alongside the note, "The Chosen One." Agent Clark directed a team to follow a narrow passage marked Sanctuary on a hand-drawn map on the wall, leading to an even deeper level where a faint sound could be heard, Mercer's voice calmly reading a children's story. As the tactical team prepared to breach the sanctuary, an elaborate alarm system suddenly triggered throughout the complex, followed by the sound of heavy metal doors closing in sequence, and Mercer's voice echoed through the speakers. You really think I didn't know you'd come? Now we have to accelerate our journey to a safer place. Say goodbye, Ethan. Your parents will never see you again." Mercer's taunting voice echoed through the complex as heavy doors slammed shut in sequence. Inside the command van, Rebecca clutched Mark's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. "We have multiple sealed access points," a tactical officer reported through the radio. "Systems engaging emergency locks throughout the structure." Agent Clark immediately took charge. "Find me another way in. He knows this place better than we do, but there's always a weakness." Detective Morales pored over the facility blueprints, her finger tracing a thin line on the far edge. "Here, emergency ventilation shafts designed for chemical leaks. They wouldn't be connected to the main security protocols because they were meant as escape routes." Within minutes, she had assembled a small team including herself, 2 tactical officers, and, against every protocol, Mark Williams, who refused to be left behind. "I'm going," he stated flatly, accepting the bulletproof vest Morales handed him. "This is my son." Inside the facility, the ventilation shaft proved narrower than expected, forcing the team to crawl through decades of dust and cobwebs. Mark followed Morales closely, focusing on her boots ahead of him rather than the claustrophobic darkness pressing in from all sides. Through their earpieces, they could hear the main tactical team working to breach the sealed doors with plasma cutters. Progress was agonizingly slow, as Mercer had reinforced key access points over the years, anticipating exactly this scenario. After 20 minutes of navigating the maze-like shafts, they heard voices below, 1 adult, 1 child. They froze, listening intently. "The others weren't ready," Mercer was saying, his voice eerily calm. "But you survived alone in the tunnels. You proved you're special." Through a small grate, Morales could see into what Mercer called his sanctuary. The walls were painted sky blue with childish clouds, creating a surreal contrast to the underground bunker. Mercer was calmly packing a small backpack, while Ethan sat rigidly on a child-sized chair, watching his captor prepare what appeared to be a syringe. "This will help you relax during our journey," Mercer explained, tapping the needle. "Our new home is far away from here." Ethan, showing remarkable presence of mind, deliberately knocked over a water bottle on the table beside him. "I'm sorry, I'm nervous," he said, stalling as Mercer mopped up the spill. "You said the other children liked the new place?" Morales signaled silently to her team, pointing to a grate a few meters ahead that would position them better for entry. They inched forward with excruciating care, knowing any noise could alert Mercer. In the command center above, Rebecca watched Ethan's face on a camera feed they'd managed to access. She spoke calmly into the radio to Morales, guiding the team through the ventilation layout using digitized blueprints, her voice steady despite her terror. Mercer checked security monitors, showing rescue teams making progress through the outer doors. "We have to leave now," he said, reaching for Ethan's arm. "Our new home awaits us." Ethan's eyes flicked upward, noticing subtle movement in the ventilation grate above. Understanding dawned in his expression, though he carefully kept his face neutral. "I'm thirsty," he said, deliberately dropping his cup this time. "Can I have more water before we go?" Morales silently descended from the ventilation shaft, while Mercer's back was turned, signaling the others to follow. She had her weapon drawn, moving with practiced silence across the room. When Mercer turned, he froze momentarily before grabbing Ethan, pressing the syringe against his neck. "Stay back," he warned, backing toward a final door. "You don't understand. I'm saving him. Out there, he's just another child. With me, he's special." Mark stepped forward despite Morales's warning hand, his voice breaking. "He already is special. He always has been. Please, let him come back to the people who love him." The standoff hung in tense silence until Scout suddenly emerged from the ventilation shaft, barking furiously at recognizing the threat to Ethan. The momentary distraction was all they needed. Ethan bit Mercer's hand and threw himself sideways, as his parents had recently taught him in self-defense classes. Morales and her team moved instantly, subduing Mercer as he cried out in pain and surprise. Mark reached Ethan first, wrapping his arms around his son, while Scout jumped around them, licking the boy's face as Rebecca's joyful sobs came through the radio. 6 months after Ethan's final rescue, the Williams family led a ceremony at Mapleton City Hall, where the mayor announced the creation of the Echo Foundation, dedicated to improving the city's safety infrastructure, funding search dog training, and providing therapeutic support for traumatized children. And as Ethan, now with an officially decorated therapy dog Scout by his side, cut the ribbon for the new children's wing of the hospital bearing his name, he whispered to his parents, "The tunnels taught me that darkness is scary, but they also showed me that always there is a way back to the light."